at the end of the day, if your brand messages and your tactical sales pitches work together, and your sales ultimately go up because you've cultivated an audience, not just like vomited sales at them, then you're good. But you do need, at least I need, and I think most organizations that are sales driven and business driven, you'd still need to show the growth. But you have that ability to be like, how do we get there? And it might be sometimes it's a sales pitch and a sale, and sometimes it's like, let's give our customer base some breathing room and remind them, here's why we do what we do.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Over A Pint, the podcast that focuses on the fast-paced world of marketing told through the eyes of industry veterans. No theory here. This is real-world practical experience. Riding shotgun with me today is Mr. Kurt Lingle, Vice President of Celtic Advertising. Celtic is a full-service award-winning agency located in Milwaukee's historic Third Ward. And myself, Pat McGovern, Director of New Business Development at Acedia, an award-winning digital agency also located here in Milwaukee. Today, we are talking to the man, Tim Cigelske. Don't know Tim? Spend about 5 minutes on LinkedIn and you'll run across his content. The brother is a content machine.
Patty's everywhere.
And on today's pod, we're going to be talking about content, beer, and a few other things around marketing. Tim, welcome to the pod. You ready to go?
Let's do it. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, Tim. It's called Over a Pint for a reason. What are you enjoying today? I'm going to guess it's going to be in the Sprecher family.
Oh, yeah, I'm a little lame right now. So when I first started at Sprecher, I'm like, you can just pull the tap levers behind you and have beer anytime you want. And then I'm like, whoa, this job is really intense. So I usually save my beer for the nighttime. So I'm drinking coffee. I drink plenty of coffee during the day. And at night, so let's pretend this was being recorded at night. I like the juicy IPA from Sprecher. I just enjoyed a few of those this week, and I have really gotten into mixing a little bit of Sprecher soda with bourbon. So my wife and I both will indulge in that at night. You can't go wrong with just root beer and bourbon over ice. But my favorite is the cherry cola with bourbon. Trust me, try that tonight. It's amazing.
Cherry cola with bourbon. Oh, that is
taking notes.
Sounds good.
Mr. Lingle, what do you got, man?
We are recording this show. What time is it now, Pat? About 1:30 or 1:15? But it's not going to air till tonight. So I'm having a beer. I am having a beer. It's called Over A Pint. No surprise here. I'm going with the Sprecher, right? I've got their special amber.
Excellent.
But I will tell you this, I'm an IPA guy too, but Tim, I just love the Black Bavarian. And I'm not a darker, but I love your Black Bavarian. But I'm going special amber. Cheers! Great having you back.
Good call. Cheers,
guys. I got the Sprecher Wood beer, which I wish I had a little bit with this right now, but I don't. There we go. Let's get that on the camera. There we go. Anyway, cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Tim, I'm fired up about this this interview. I know Kurt is as well. We were talking right before you got on. You are just a super interesting guy. You have got a big following. So let's just back up. Let's back the train up just a little bit. Start it with this. Tim, give us the elevator speech. Give us a little bit about you, and give us a little bit about not only your career, but how did you end up in marketing? Right? Give us that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my career off in journalism, actually, and figured, just be a newspaper person for life, or maybe venture into magazines. And got my degree and went off, worked for the State Journal, worked for the Associated Press, worked in Madison, worked for Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, worked for a weekly that was owned by the Journal Sentinel. And a couple of years into my career, our department was totally cut. We had a weekly newspaper. It was in the early stages of social media. And the kind of silver lining of that job is you were able to take a lot of risks. You were able to try a lot of things. It was a young adult weekly owned by the Journal Sentinel trying to break into new demographics. And it was just a little too early where they're like, let's try, reaching people through MySpace. Let's try reaching people through Facebook, which was new. And then now let's try reaching people through Twitter and live blogs. And I had a updated daily blog where we'd post multiple times a day on the website, which seemed like really aggressive. At the time, we're updating throughout the day. And then I had a blog called Train with Tim, where I kind of indulged in my own interests and wrote about someone training for her first marathon, and then trained people who were trained for their first triathlon. So the silver lining for that job is I really dove into social media and was able to experiment and try new things. And at the time, marketing was just starting to embrace social media and realize the power of it. So I applied for an open position at my alma mater, Marquette University, and in the marketing communication office, they're like, let's try this communication specialist role where someone maybe dabbles in social media and see, maybe it lasts a year. And then it'll go back to traditional channels or whatever. And so my first couple of years, just really establishing a digital footprint for Marquette. Started a Twitter account my first day, started our Facebook advertising, YouTube, all those sort of things. And just it was this wide open field to try and see where this went. And two things. One is I really learned, how I could apply my journalism background in content and writing and telling a story to this new medium of social media. And so I did that and really adapted and became a marketer and a storyteller using these new networks. And then secondly, is just really learning how to sell your ideas and sell your profession, your strategy, all those sort of things, because social media was unproven. It was not the traditional channels we've been using for 130 years at Marquette. So having to share with suddenly senior vice presidents and deans and go to conferences that, maybe Twitter has some value and here's what we're doing from it, became a valuable skill throughout my career of how can you sell something and get buy-in and grow. So I did that for a number of years. I was actually at Marquette for 13 years, roles that expanded into different areas of marketing. Taught, still teach to this day, social media classes, marketing classes, all those sort of things. And then, during the last 2 years, like a lot of people, stayed at home, had a lot of family time, had a lot of time for reflection. And both my wife and I came to the conclusion that we wanted to try something different, try something new. Wasn't exactly sure what that would be for me. Started making a list of maybe career pivots or career opportunities. And my wife decided she wanted to start her own dance studio. So I really went and did everything I can to support her startup. From my kind of marketing perspective, created an email list, created social media for her, built a website, those sort of things. And then kind of turned to, okay, what does my, future look like in marketing and communication? What could I do next? And literally had a short list of here's some places I may want to work someday, or maybe have coffee with people and see what, the opportunities are there. And one of the things on the top of my list was Sprecher Brewery, because I knew, first of all, I had Sprecher, for years. I enjoyed their beers and their root beer, and seeing what was happening at Sprecher at the top with the new investment group and new leadership. This could be an opportunity where I can maybe come in, bring some of my background and help out something that has almost like a startup mentality. So I did. I reached out to Sherrod, the CEO, connected with him on LinkedIn. We exchanged some messages, and not too long after that, saw that they were hiring and applied for this role, which now has evolved and encompassed a lot of different things. Learn something new every day. The way I like to characterize it is I feel like I'm living in an MBA program. I got my MBA not too long before I left Marquette, graduated with my MBA, and now I'm seeing all that put into practice. Meeting with supply chain, meeting with accounting, meeting with design, seeing how all these elements come together and just starting to learn how to connect the dots. Certainly not there yet, and all the things I have to learn and all the places I need to get my hands dirty. But it's exactly what I was, what I needed, what I was looking for, and like a new challenge and a new way to apply these sort of skills. So that's kind of my journey, starting with journalism, thinking I'm just going to be someone who, maybe stays the same path, and then just realizing, careers have twists and turns, and it's where I am today.
Tim, I gotta ask you, because we want to get to the brand, but we're talking about you right now. You're at Marquette for 13 years. That to me just says stability, stable, predictability in a good way, Mm-hmm. But as you tell your story, you're kind of like, you know what? When I went to Marquette, I had an opportunity to start something new. There was the old way of doing marketing, and then there was this whole new universe of social media. So here you are, you're pushing the boundaries, doing something new at Marquette. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you're like, I want to try something new. It almost seems like it's in your DNA a little bit in terms of like, not just, like, I'm okay. I'm cool. Let's start. I want to learn. I want to push the boundaries on this new discipline called social media, whatever we want to call it time. And now all of a sudden, like, I'm going to push the boundaries and just leave and start something new. Is that part of who you are, your DNA, in terms of like, you know what? I'm not afraid to explore and open that door, not knowing who's on the other end.
Yeah, there definitely are some parallels, even though they seem like very different industries and very different experiences. Mm-hmm. Marquette has been around for 130 years. Jesuit education has been around for 500. So the nice thing about that and about this situation is you have a foundation, right? You're not starting completely from scratch, where nothing wrong with starting completely from scratch, and that was exciting when I worked with my wife to get a dance studio off the ground, to find a place to rent, to build a website from scratch. Like those are fun challenges as well. But they're a different challenge, and these challenges of taking an already established foundation and then seeing, as you said, Kurt, where can you push the boundaries, is really fun and interesting and a different challenge. Mm-hmm. So I kind of felt like I certainly had those challenges at Marquette. I started social media from day one and pushed on things, and sometimes got pushed back, and also learned where can you have your impact, where can you start something new? Where do you let things be a bit more stable and maybe find a different challenge elsewhere? And then, at Sprecher, it's been around 37 years, which in craft beer world is a long time. It was, as we say, the original, pioneer in craft breweries in Wisconsin, the first one that opened after Prohibition. And it's definitely gone through an evolution over time, and especially in the last 2 years. So what's great about this is, things like that people may not always think about. Like, we have a website that needs overhauling, and that's what we're working on, but it also has been around a long time. So the domain brings in a lot of SEO traffic. Mm-hmm. We have an amazing root beer recipe that people try once and they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is the best root beer I've ever had. And our challenge now is like, how do we get that to more people? How are more people in more states aware of it? How do people in Texas who drink more, soft drinks year round become aware of Sprecher and the quality that it represents? So yes, to your point, like, it's a really fascinating, challenge, and yeah, maybe it's in my DNA. I don't know. Yeah. But this idea of like pushing existing boundaries, not trying to topple something over, or not trying to always maybe start something from scratch, but just figure out how can you push it a little farther. I find that a really interesting challenge. And you do get pushback. You do like upset some norms sometimes, and you have to figure out how do you do that within the sort of confines of what you have to work with. So yeah, good observation.
Would you say, and I want to stay on this for a second, Pat, because I'm kind of fascinated by this. So we had the opportunity to have Sherrod. We had Sprecher on back in November, and it was fascinating meeting him. I mean, that was such a wonderful interview. in so many ways, but you hit it on the head. Sprecher has been around for 37 years, and you're right, in the beer industry, craft beer industry, that's a long time. However, it was very clear with Sherrod, heavy entrepreneurship. I mean, there was just this different way of thinking. Is that in your blood too? Have you? I mean, it's like, because it seems like at Sprecher, it's kind of like, you know what? That's in our blood, entrepreneurship. It doesn't matter what you're doing. All hands on deck.
100%. And that's the kind of like, you know, I don't know if people are still use the phrase entrepreneur, but that's what I always thought of myself as at Marquette. You know, like it has this huge, you know, institution, and I would do things like pitch a new class and say like, hey, let's teach, you know, social media analytics and create that from the ground up. Or maybe we should offer 2 of these classes in the summer because this class is filling up and there's demand for it. So why don't we just put a second section here and see what happens? And if we have to cancel it because there's not enough enrollment, we cancel it. But lo and behold, there was enough enrollment. So that's something to your point, like what you said with Sherrod is very entrepreneurial. And when you already have things to work with, it's like a playground for entrepreneurs because like, you know, sometimes you have to invent the process or create the process, but sometimes the process is maybe partially created. And then you're just like, how can we make this better? You know, what other products can we put here? What other, you know, press releases need to go out to new journalists? When is there an opportunity to send out, you know, media relations opportunities? So yeah, like we use the term entrepreneurial a lot, which not everyone may associate with a company that's been around for 37 years. But it's 100% how we see ourselves. And it's definitely how I see myself as, you know, where are there opportunities that I can fit in and maybe add some value.
Okay, guys, we got a lot to cover here. And Sam, let's start pivoting and kind of getting into some specifics. Because I really want to get your take on this. So Marquette and Sprecher, those are 2 vastly different worlds. Let's start here. What did you learn from Marquette that you could apply to Sprecher in terms of content marketing, in terms of social marketing?
Yeah. So it's interesting. The content, I don't want to say is the easy part, but it's the stuff where I can pump out with maybe less thought process. That sounds bad, but let me explain. So like, I know like I can get a press release out quickly. And I can do that like when I have a moment to catch my breath between other operations. So I didn't realize coming in here exactly, and maybe others didn't either, how much of this job entails operations. So my title is Director of Communication. I've been here 6 months, and I don't even know what title I would suggest for me, because e-commerce and communication and growing our tours and our retail and all those sort of things, they require knowing operations and who should be at the table to get a keg of root beer out the door and to ship a 12-pack of soda to Idaho in the winter when it's freezing. So the content side of things, I'm like, that I can almost, I don't want to say do in my sleep, but like I can help with that, you know, quickly. I can get something out as needed. That I bring a lot from Marquette, where I'm like, give me a second, I'll do this, you know, like I could do that. I know that really well. Where it requires more thought and where Marquette still helped me is connecting the dots to the people who need to be at the table and that connective tissue. So I actually told someone I used to work with, a former colleague at Marquette, that she taught me a lot about being the connective tissue of an organization. And so like if there's like colleges and deans and different people who need to talk to each other, the communication people are often the people who are like, talk to each other. You know, you need conveners, you need people who set meetings, who get people at the table. All those sort of things are not always, they're not the content that you produce, but they're necessary for the content. They're necessary for the success. They're the event planning. That's the, you know, get the supply chain to talk to the procurement person. So then when we do have a sale for Easter, we actually have boxes that will ship out, that we have on time, that we have the flyers that need to go into the boxes to get people to sign up for our email list and all those sort of things. So great question. And my answer is really like, it taught me a lot about content development, but the sort of behind the scenes sort of thing, it taught me about just as much. And that's where I feel like I'm learning every day about like, who did I forget to invite to this meeting? Because they weren't part of my world before. I never had to think about, supply chain. But now I do. So it's all those things that go into it. That's part of a sort of medium-sized organization that I find that I am, again, that MBA program I'm living through on a day-to-day basis.
So Tim, break it down then for me and for Kurt is in terms of, let's just hang on the content piece for a little bit. How do you go about it, right? I mean, there's a lot of different things coming at you. You guys are moving very, very quickly. Things are changing all the time. You're in a very dynamic world. So how do you map things out in terms of just, we're going to get, like, what's the flow of content? How do you approach it? Kind of break things down for us as to how you're looking at, and include like, okay, these are the things that we know, right? We know things basically are going to happen, but there's also I'm trying to build in room for, hey, these are things that could go on, right? So just give us some of that, your thought process on that.
Yeah, so really funny you should ask that. Like, that's literally what I'm doing right now, because it has been a day by day, hour by hour thing for so long. And when I started, it's like the first day I started, we like had bought Green River and a whole group of a soda company out of Chicago. So I was like, all right, well, do we have a media list? No. Oh, well, we found one from like 10 years ago. Here's one, here it is. And I looked at it, and I'm like, half these companies are out of business, and I actually was on the media list as a freelance beer writer, because I used to, write for a beer magazine. I'm like, man, I could pitch it to myself. So it started with just as like, build the airplane as we fly it, like create a media list, get a meltwater membership, create like a distribution list for different types of reporters, create a Chicago and Milwaukee list. A lot of work still to be done there. And now that I am like 6 months in, I'm like, okay, let's back up. How can we start to plan ahead a little bit so we're not day to day? So creating a content calendar, an email list, or an email content calendar for 3 months in advance. Started there. Like, let's do that and figure out, like, what do we need to do for graduation season and for Easter and for summer, for Summerfest, for all those sort of things. You probably can't see this, but behind me, this is from a meeting this morning where I literally just started creating a week-to-week plan. So we plan a week to 2 weeks in advance with our social calendar, and explaining that to my team of like why we do that, like how we can get more input, how we can get more time for editing and cushion, and set it and forget it, and schedule things in advance. I use this example. I mentioned, I worked for a newspaper that was a weekly. So I felt like I was living in two different time zones. I was living in real time when things actually happened. And then I was always 2 weeks in advance, where it's like, I felt like when Valentine's Day happened, like, oh, that happened 2 weeks ago. Like I was planning that in January, and created all the content and the writing and the interviews, back in January. And when it actually happened, then you're prepared and you're ready. So these are some pretty basic blocking and tackling things. It's not rocket science, but it's just giving yourself some room to expand, to breathe. And then, to your point, when things do come up, you can pivot. And if something comes up in terms of real time content, we can say, let's pause this email or this social post. Now we have it in the can for next week or whenever we want to use it, but this is timely. So let's put this here. An example of that was we had like a spring merchandise sale, and about to do 20% off for like short sleeve shirts and hats and that sort of, and caps and that sort of thing. Well, you know what it's been like in March and April. It has not been very spring-like. So it'd be like, okay, so this is not great timing to tell people like dress for spring, and warm weather's here and it's coming when we're getting snow in April. So maybe when people are listening to this, it will be 60 degrees finally, but when we're recording this, it's like 30, maybe 35. So we created all that and then paused it. So that's kind of what I'm focused on right now, is like, how do we give ourselves some breathing room? How do we plan? And then once we get our legs under us, then we can be like, maybe we can do some real special things. Maybe we can plan 6 months in advance for a really big event, which we're planning right now for some summer things. But those, I mean, I'm hoping that people who are listening, they're like, we do that. I'm like, great. You should be doing that. But not everyone is ready for that yet.
Yeah. Let me ask you about, I want to get into the story a little bit. So we're talking about, there's the tactics behind things, your war board behind you. And I think you're right. It's like, but I want to jump into the story. So, in a town like Milwaukee or in certain beer towns, there's no excuse to have a bad beer, right? It's like, there's good beer everywhere. Sprecher has great beer. So check the box. We can all agree on that. Check the box. You wouldn't be in business for as long as you've been if you didn't deliver a good product. I want to talk about the story because, every business, every brand has a story. There's a vibe. There's a DNA behind it. And I want to hear from you. What is that story, the personality, the vibe? Because I've been observing what you've been doing. I'm kind of picking up on some things, but Tim, in your opinion and Sprecher's point of view, what is the story? What is the vibe? What's the personality that you all stand behind?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're picking up on some things. I hope so, because I'm trying to put some pieces together and get it out there. So to go back to that content piece, one of the things I'm most comfortable in is long form writing, or just writing in general. I'm like, I can like give me some threads, give me some anecdotes, and let's tie those together and tell a story. So we again, kind of flying by the seat of our pants, taking opportunities to just push content out there that may be related to like a sale or a time of year. And now with a bit more perspective, being able to like actually write down and connect some dots. So the example I'd give is really when we started is I looked at the calendar. I'm like, okay, we're about a 2-year mark of this new leadership for Sprecher. So let's write a letter from the CEO that tells people what we've done and where we're going. And it was, maybe, I don't know, a 400-word, 500-word piece that went in the email, our blog, and social media. And it wasn't a selling point, and it wasn't like a, like buy our root beer sort of thing. But within there, it like had like a link to like, you could shop and buy soda and that sort of thing. But it was really about backing up and telling people like, this is why you buy our root beer. This is why we make our root beer. This is our story. This is our mission. And surprisingly, like, great open rates, not surprisingly, it's what we wanted, but like even more than I expected, like great open rates, great response, like ton of comments on LinkedIn and social media. And people also clicked on those links and bought our soda. So it kind of shows that like stories resonate, stories work. And now trying to be more intentional about telling those stories more often in more channels and more depth. So Kurt, you're wearing an Ice Age Trail hat, which as you know, we hosted a river cleanup on a couple of weeks ago for Earth Month. Terrible weather, it snowed on people, but you got these dedicated people who came out and then got rewarded with free beer, free soda. But it was really about like, being part of the community, being part of the story and the mission. And related to that, we have an email that it's going out tomorrow morning. No, not tomorrow morning, Friday morning. Don't know what day it is, for Earth Day. And it's a longer form piece by email standards. It's not like a buy our root beer sort of thing. It starts off, it's like picture yourself going to the traveling beer garden this summer, biking along a path and arriving, getting a cold beer and sitting under a tree for shade. Now we're proud that Sprecher has contributed $250,000 to Milwaukee Parks over 9 years to the traveling beer garden to make all those things possible. paid for trail paving, paid for tree plantings, paid for 80 accessible bathrooms, and then of course had the beer available at the beer garden. And then use that as like a framing to talk about, here are some other ways that Sprecher has been environmentally friendly and conscious from the very beginning to this day. So those are stories that, you can say they have PR value or they have marketing value, but they're really central to any company's both external and internal story. And I tell this all the time to people here, is like, we have to like tell our own story to ourselves. We have to remind ourselves why we do these things, and tell the whole company, and tell, so I have these Friday newsletters that go out to the whole company, and it's just called the Brew Good Things newsletter. And it's not always like a, deep dive into mission, but it reminds us of good things that are happening, why we do what we do. And so I need that myself as like a communication person, and as someone who's came from higher ed, very mission driven. I need to remind myself, like, hey, there's a mission behind the root beer. There's a mission to a locally owned company that's been around in Wisconsin for 37 years that sources their honey from Germantown, Wisconsin. Those are all really important points for everyone. And it also is, a story that we want to continue to get out to the community. So if you're picking up on that, good.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
Well, and I would say this too, just, and give yourself a lot of credit. So I participated in that river cleanup, and the weather was terrible. That said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You were doing something good. And, and I guess, when I was talking about personality, the thing that I pick up on, and I think that's probably all of us, because we're marketers and, brand practitioners, we pick up on brand personalities. When you look at Sprecher, and Tim, I was going back and forth with you a little bit, and Pat, with some questions. You sell beyond the cheese curtain, as someone once said. It's like, your products don't live just within our state; they go beyond the curtain, the cheese curtain. But I'll tell you, there's something it was just very communal, and not. Yep. You might expect that in the industry, but that isn't always the case. And I picked up on that when I was there. I was meeting people for the first time on the river cleanup. There was just something very communal, and I think that's something I pick up on your brand whenever I go in there, and you see it just filled with people. There's something communal. You're hanging out. That isn't the case everywhere. So, for sure.
Yeah. Seeing one of the best parts of this job is seeing the tap room fill up on Thursday night or Thursday afternoons, Friday afternoons. Just like suddenly seeing like people show up for tours and just come in, and it just feels like magic. So it's a great word, communal. It feels very communal, and there's something really gratifying about that, being able to bring people together.
For sure.
We need that.
For sure.
You have you mentioned this a couple times when you were talking about telling stories and using different channels in order to get your message out there without necessarily always just selling, right? You get it. How hard is that idea to get through, though, within the organization? I mean, do you find that you have an easy time going, hey, listen, pump the brakes. We don't always have to be shilling something. It's about more than always trying to.
I like that bottle of.
Yeah. What's your so. Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, yes, you're totally right. At the end of the day, this is a business, and you have to show growth, results, sales, all those sort of things. And that's what we're accountable. That's what I'm accountable to. Didn't realize exactly like, whoa, this is a little different than higher ed, where it's like, we'll bring in some students, every year, and some donations, and we've done our job. And it's like, what have you done today? What have you done this week? How many cases have we sold? How much growth do we see in our e-commerce, in our retail, and how are we getting to that? That has been really eye-opening. And also, again, like I learned so much. I'm like, okay, how do we sell something, that people are going to pay full price for because it's a premium? If we have custom 4-in-4 labels, we're selling that, beyond Milwaukee. You get people all over. We had people in Utah and Oklahoma buy these sort of things. So that has made me very tactical for sure. But to your point then about, being strategic and like pump the brakes and like, let's talk about brand and that sort of thing. How do we do that? I would say that falls into the category of, well, if you can see the proof in the pudding, then that's enough. It's like, it's not like I have to get approval for every message that goes out, in email or social or that sort of thing. We have creative freedom to do that, and that's really great. I don't take that for granted, and that's another thing I love about this job is just the ability to try things. And then at the end of the day, if your brand messages and your tactical sales pitches work together, and your sales ultimately go up because you've cultivated an audience, not just like vomited sales at them, then you're good. But you do need, at least I need, and I think most organizations that are sales driven and business driven, you'd still need to show the growth. But you have that ability to be like, how do we get there? And it might be sometimes it's a sales pitch and a sale, and sometimes it's like, let's give our customer base some breathing room and remind them, here's why we do what we do. And if you can do those both things together, then hopefully it'll be fine.
So, I've heard other people talk about kind of their mix of brand versus tactics, right? Selling tactics that kind of breaks out into like a 70-30 mix. Just for the listeners here, like, is that like, do you kind of keep that idea like, listen, 70% of the time we want to be push a product, but that 30% is that additional room, or do you guys have a different mixture? Like, are you more half and half? I'm just curious.
I feel like you've been sitting in the meetings that we've been doing lately, because you're definitely hitting the nail on the head of like, here are the conversations I've been having with my team and around is what is that right mix? And it is, and we're not always going to find the perfect balance. Maybe we'll go one way or another. If it's the end of the month and we have like more soda we got to sell, maybe this is a sales pitch. But like, again, right behind me, talking about like, here's how much we should be just hitting root beer, just pure root beer. Talk about that because it's like 70% of our sales. So let's do, for the rest of the year, let's do a monthly or bi-month or twice monthly email, and we could make that right now and have them all, ready to go. But then, like I literally use that phrase, like maybe we're 80-20, of 20%. We're talking about other things like the quality of our beer, our origin, Earth Day, big picture, things like where we get our honey locally. So we actually like looked at the number of our posts, and that is something we're starting to quantify. But you're totally right. It's like, yeah, you're gonna probably have to lead with your sales pitch. And I've also seen companies that maybe take the opposite. And it's interesting to see how they're succeeding if they are, where like maybe only 20% are actual sales pitches and 80% are just them talking about brand. I don't know. And maybe it's right for people, for other companies or for certain ones that they really focus on like, here's who we are. We're going to keep reminding you who we are. But I don't think we've found that correct ratio yet, but we're certainly talking about it. So you're flying on the wall in one of our meetings.
We've been eavesdropping. Tim, from Sprecher's perspective, and I want you to answer what you think on this. So one of the cool things about the podcast that we've been doing over the last year plus, we talked to all sorts of companies, big, small, local, national. And every so often we come across an iconic brand. And iconic brands can live locally and they can live nationally. We had Sendix on recently. In my opinion, Sendix is an iconic brand around these parts, very much so.
Totally.
Let's talk about Sprecher. If you were to ask me, I think Sprecher is an iconic brand. It has a lot of runway, a lot of history. It means something. We talked about this with Sherrod when he was on. What do you think about that? What's your opinion on the Sprecher brand when it comes to the equity and its place as an iconic brand?
Yeah. And that's a word that Sherrod likes to use a lot, talking about Sprecher is iconic. And I completely 100% agree with him. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Like one is being first, being a pioneer. Craft beer has become almost mythological, right? There's big players in it. There's, people like New Belgium and Dogfish Head, Sam Adams, that just have become larger than life sort of things. And just being that locally, being that regionally in Wisconsin, showing up at the right time was a big part of it. The taste and the quality. The New York Times named Sprecher the best root beer in the country. You can't underestimate that. Just like, it's so damn good, And I see that all the time on social media when people are having root beer debates, which is a big thing on social media right now. Sprecher's always showing up. People are talking about Mug and Barks and A&W. They're like, no, Sprecher, the goat. Like, I see that a lot. So the taste. One interesting thing that really makes it iconic as well is the glass bottle. So we also now are offering cans. There's a new consumer that prefers their drink in cans, but the fact we have this 16-ounce embossed, looks like a beer bottle, looks special, sets it apart, makes it different. So I think those things make Sprecher iconic. And then I'm going to add one more thing that I think makes it iconic for the region, and that's the fact that we're from Milwaukee. And I am realizing, not that I didn't know this before, but there's so much civic pride in being from Milwaukee, being from the Midwest, maybe being, have like, we talk a certain way. We have certain phrases like "ope" that become like celebrated on social media. When there's contests on Twitter about the best city in America, literally Milwaukee won, beat like New York and all these other ones. So there's so much pride in Milwaukee that when, like I mentioned before, like when we made a 414 Milwaukee root beer, it sold beyond Wisconsin. It sold a lot beyond Wisconsin, whether those were, someone who went to college in Milwaukee or expats from Milwaukee or retired somewhere else. Or just visiting or have like family in a different region. That sort of name of being from Milwaukee makes it iconic. So I think like part of it has to do with Sprecher, and then a lot of it has to do with just our own community and that ownership over something that it feels like it's your own.
Hey, Tim, Kurt, I think you would agree with this. When we talk to Sherrod, when we talk to you, I mean, we just get the vibe. There's a lot going on. Like, you hit the ground running every day, right? The pedal is pressed. And I totally appreciate that. Again, given the fact that a company's 37 years old, you seem and are functioning very much like startup. Hats off, because I think that's what it's going to take to win. Talk to us, though. You can't do it yourself, Tim. You got a million things going on. You're super prolific. Like, you're posting and doing a lot of stuff. But talk to us about the team. Like, what's the communications team like over at Sprecher? How do you get it all done?
Yeah. So, I think we started talking a little bit before we started recording too, is like, I'm hiring interns, and I'm deep into interviews right now. If anyone is listening to this and wants to apply, do it quickly. But hiring interns, and specifically looking at interns that can complement, our social media specialist, our web developer, and maybe bring some like project-based ability. So I'm looking for interns that can just build out meltwater databases of journalists around the country, so we can pitch journalists in Texas when we ever roll out there, or journalists in Arizona. So we just need more. To your point, like we operate like a startup, and we have a lot of stuff going on. We just need competent people and doers who can get some, check some projects off the list. And so, that's where I'm looking at, like, hiring multiple interns in different areas. And then interns, of course, can't do it all. They're learning on the job. I was an intern once, and I managed a lot of interns. They're great, but they also need guidance. So looking at, what are the right seats on the bus for, if we're scaling and growing, what people do we need to add to the team, while being cost effective, and building the team along with your revenue and your growth. So I have interviews this week for a taproom manager, someone that will, be responsible for tours and can also help grow that side of the business, which is growing quickly as people return to in-person events. And then one thing I just researched and I pitched actually this week to our HR manager and CEO is, like, we need a fulfillment manager, someone that can handle both in-person fulfillment for online ordering and e-commerce shipping, and then also handle if, like, an order was mixed up, that they fix it. It's their responsibility. And that goes back to what I was talking about with operations is like, there's a lot that goes into this role that goes beyond content and goes beyond communication. It starts with, the pipeline and then ends with fulfillment and then continues with the customer journey. So I'm learning a lot in the job and I'm trying to learn along with my team. Like, is there a Coursera course we should be taking about SEO? What else should we learn about Shopify? I have a lot to learn, and I'm trying to be a student at the same time. I'm a teacher, and I think it's an enriching mentality to be in, and that's one of the big reasons why I wanted a challenge like this.
Hey Tim, you threw around the get the right people on the bus. Can I assume? I don't like ever to assume because it gets me in trouble. Can I assume the good to great philosophy is something where people buy into, where it's get those right people on the bus, and then we'll figure out where they go? You said it earlier. You were like, you came on board. And it's like, I don't even know what the title would be. I don't know. I mean, to me, that says you were the right person to get on the bus. And now we're kind of figuring out where Tim should kind of fall. He's doing all sorts of things. Is that a safe assumption?
Yeah. Business books have been a big friend of mine because, again, I started off as a journalist and didn't think about myself as someone who understood business. And when I got into higher ed, I started reading a lot of marketing books and business books, Jim Collins, Good to Great, Built to Last, and then his like trilogy, like How the Mighty Fall. Big fan of those. I got my MBA, and at the time it was really all theoretical. And so I read these and they were fascinating. And now I'm like, oh, these are real principles. Like this is why people talk about that. So I'm reading a book right now called Deep Purpose, about business. And I'm just constantly trying to consume, whether it's marketing or business related. How can I learn on the job? I think I've always tried to do that, different points in my career. And right now I'm just consuming as much as I can, for sure.
Cool.
Tim, let's hang on that for a minute, because that's what are you consuming? What are the books, but even beyond books, right? Which are awesome. I love that. But like, how do you stay fresh with just what's going on in the social space? Like, are there people that you follow? Are there what areas are you consuming? Just to say, in your words, to stay fresh, right? And keep learning.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, the Deep Purpose. So I subscribe to Porchlight Books, which used to be 1-800-CEO Read, and they supply business books. And I'm always looking for their email. This is a free plug for them. Their weekly email digest is amazing. I always read Dylan's reviews, what books I should be diving into. So that's a big resource for me of what business books are available. I've always been a fan of Seth Godin. I get his daily blog. He writes about marketing, but really talks about a lot more than that. And I feel like every day I have to stop scrolling through my inbox to just take a minute to read Seth Godin's blog and what perspective is he providing that maybe marketing or business or just life related. I also like spirituality books. I need to read more these days. I've been reading a lot of business books, but anything Buddhism related and mindfulness, I think are helpful. Of course, not just for life, but you look at people like Phil Jackson, who incorporated that into their strategy. And then from a purely tactical level, Twitter has been kind of experimenting, I think, with different follower lists and ability to follow different topics. And I follow somehow once I started following and favoriting a few tweets, now my whole feed is DTC, so direct to consumer related marketing. And I'm learning a ton on just, email integrations, and it's a very tactical thing. But I'm like, okay, this is a good web form for, SMS marketing. This is how you capture, people who go to your website in the best way, the most unobtrusive way. So those are the kind of things I'm learning at a very tactical level from Twitter.
Cool. Tim, talk to us about your views of the different channels, of the different social channels. What's your favorite? How do you approach them from a business standpoint? It's like, hey, listen, we really like to focus our content in this channel this way. This is how we'd like to do it here. Give us a little bit of that breakdown, a little bit behind the curtain for the listeners.
Yeah. So I really like Twitter. It's kind of like my first, it's like my native platform. And I would say I start there because it's where I'm most comfortable. And both from a personal standpoint of like, how can I learn from thought leaders, and from a social listening for your brand. I have a social list or a social keyword saved search for Sprecher or Sprechers, because actually, so I found from social listening is there's a lot of people call it Sprechers with an S. And seeing, like, how can you find people who are already talking about your brand, but maybe aren't, tagging you, adding you, those sort of things. So it's great for social listening. But I will say that every social network really has their strengths and weaknesses. Facebook is terrible for social listening. Like, I can't, eavesdrop on people's conversations about root beer there, and nor should I. But it has the biggest reach. So if we want to just gain pure traffic and have the biggest, audience, you go to Facebook. And then if you want to, build a buzz, do something fun, maybe reach a younger demographic, those sort of things, you have TikTok and Instagram stories and reels and that sort of thing. So to answer your question, like, you have to know the capabilities of each one and the limitations of each one. Like, I know, like, I'm just not going to get a lot of traffic from Twitter. It's just people don't like to click on links there and go to your website. But it's great for customer discovery and customer listening. So even though I'm comfortable with it, I have to know, like, where are our customers and what do they want and what are our goals, which could be different depending on the day and what you're trying to do.
Know your audience.
Yeah, for sure, man, for sure. Look, Tim, let's wind this down. I got a couple more things, and then we'll do a wrap. And the last one is or one of the last ones, I guess, is with all you've got going on, like, talk to us about the hot buttons that you've got that you're dealing with right now. Like, you're trying to learn the operation side of things. What are the things that are keeping you up at night? Like, where, like, you're like, I got to get this solved in the next 30 days. I'm going to really work on this in the next, where, like, kind of focusing your time, energy, and effort.
Man, I feel like I'd like to have 30 days. Sometimes it feels like I have to get this done in 30 seconds. So the big thing is a website replatforming, getting things on Shopify. Had a meeting on that today, and again, it's my war board behind me has, like, shipping issues and like solving for that. Like, what do we do for shipping rates? How do we pay for shipping without losing money, and being fair? Those sort of things. Like, just like the nitty gritty operations. It's sort of that final mile where it's like, this is like the tough stuff. Getting pretty pictures was fun and easy, not easy, but like fun, but like then solving for shipping to Idaho is the hard part. So that is the thing that's kind of keeping me up at night. The other thing, and this is a bit of a challenge for, I guess, like internal communication and storytelling, is we think about, and I say we, like, I think the industry has thought about e-commerce and retail as two different things, and they're really not anymore, and they've become more and more intertwined. So I've really tried to use the term as much as possible omnichannel and show the value of omnichannel marketing. So what we're doing on Facebook may sell a 12-pack on our website, or it may sell a 24-pack at Costco. The problem is we can't show that it sold a 24-pack at Costco when that Facebook post did. Hard to attribute those. So being able to, like, show the value internally, for the resources we need, for the projects that we work on, all those sort of things. I've just, like, used the term omnichannel a lot to be like, this is important. This is important for everybody here. And so that's like a big challenge I'm working on too.
Awesome. Hey, Tim from Sprecher, you're awesome, man. We're already running past our time. You're just a super interesting guy, and honestly, man, are so prolific. It's just, Kurt, am I right? I mean, every time you go on LinkedIn, I mean, there's
see him everywhere.
Multiple yeah.
It's like, yeah, he's like, duplicating himself. But no, I agree.
Right,
no, it's impressive.
It's not just, just throwing stuff up, Tim. What's really cool about your work and the things that you're producing is it's very thoughtful. And it just, it's like you're thinking about this and you're just being very, I guess, thoughtful in the things that you're putting out. It's really awesome. So this has been just fantastic having you on the podcast. And
for sure,
man, I hope you come again because Kurt and I love talking to you. We
do.
We'll have to do it over a real pint, not just coffee.
Yeah. Tim, is there anything before we wrap up? Is there anything you want to plug? Is there anything you want to say? We always give the final words to our guests. So what's going on at Sprecher that you want to share with our listeners? What's going on? Give it to us.
Yeah. I mean, wow. I don't want to take up too much more of your time because I already have talked a ton. So I won't give you everything that's going on, but I'll say two things.
Okay.
Two things that they're my favorite, top of my bucket list if I'm wasn't working at Sprecher, but just had the opportunity. And one is tours. Our tours are fantastic. Our tour guides are amazing. We just revamped our tour software, so it's easier to book a tour. So if you just go to sprecherbrewing.com/tours, you'll be able to book a tour. It's a bargain. $12 for an adult, $5 for anyone under 21, free for kids under 5, family friendly, which is really important to us. It's a family friendly tour. So I would suggest people book a tour. And then second is the traveling beer garden. I love beer gardens. Who doesn't love beer gardens? And we kick off on May 11th at Juneau Park, 5 p.m. With free beer. So every traveling beer garden starts, and I think there's 13 stops over the summer. Every traveling beer garden starts with free beer at 5 p.m. on the opening night. But you have to be fast because free beer goes quickly in Wisconsin. So show up and I'll get you a free pint.
That's awesome. Pat, you and I are fast. We can get there.
Yeah, we get there, no problem.
Yeah.
We'll camp out.
Put it on your calendar.
We will.
Tim, thanks again, man. Come back anytime. Mike is always open, sir.
Yep. Cheers, guys.
Thanks
Thank
a lot.
Cheers, Tim. Thank you.